Alright, we're in the 28th episode of the Chinese martial arts poetry series. In this episode, we're going to be going over a Baguazhang movement called mud palms. The movement is like so. You stand in horse, and you have one palm as if it's touching a wall, and then you have another palm that goes to reach to touch that wall, but it's not reaching with the arm, but I reach with the torso as I twist to get this to match. So it has a lot to do with the upper torso, the chest, and how it twists around the waist to get these to match. And then the movement continues like so. They come across to the other side, then over the top, and then onto the other side. So this is the movement. This is mud palms. So it's very similar to a lot of other movements in Chinese martial arts, like fully open lotus, which is seen in a lot of different kung fu methods. But the idea of mud palms and this poetry of mud palms, it actually talks about a principle that's talked about in another way with another part of Baguazhang called the mud wading step. So the mud wading step is a internal method for developing internal force with the legs as we do circle walking, which is very important for Baguazhang. So the idea of mud walking is that you're covered really high up your leg with really thick, heavy mud. So it's thick enough and heavy enough that you're struggling to pick it up, right? If you try to pick up too much, you're going to strain your thighs. So instead of using the legs muscles to do this, it's actually going to engage the core muscles and the muscles around the hips to essentially pull it out of that mud and then place it back down. And that's where we get a lot of the Bagua walking methods, where it's using the hips and the musculature around the lower torso to move the feet, because the imagery and the thought about having to pull your legs out of these mud puddles it makes the body engage in a different way than it would normally if you're just trotting along, right? But having to actually get your foot out of this mud, you have to engage a lot more core musculature to get it out of that. So it changes how the step happens and gives you more power for your stepping. So that same principle is what we talk about in mud palms. So the mud palms, you're imagining that you're covered entirely and surrounded in very viscous, liquidy-like substance like mud or molasses or something like that. So you want to imagine that this stuff is very sticky and it's very hard to move in. So as you're moving, you're not just moving through air like it's nothing, right? It's like I have to engage my core in order to move through any of this, because otherwise, right, I'm having a hard time moving, right? So it engages the core to move the arms rather than getting the arms to do the job itself. You want the core to engage and pull your arms through it. So it changes the muscularity engaged in the movement and makes it more internal, because we're trying to get the muscularity of the torso to do the work of the external limbs. This is actually done a lot of imagery in like Taiji as well. They'll pretend that they're moving through a viscous liquid, and for the same reasons, it will change the muscularity differently. It's like when your body is like tricked, right? If you are walking up the steps and then you think there's one extra step and then you fall down because there wasn't a step there, because your mind thought there was another step there, your body engaged as if there was going to be a step there, and then when there wasn't a step there, your body had to compensate suddenly, right? It's like that, but in a slightly different way, more in how the body activates rather than tricking yourself into falling over, which is not as fun. But because of the imagery, we engage the body differently and more internally to try and move through this imaginary viscous liquid. So that's how mud palms and mud wading step is meant to change the body and the muscularity and how it activates as we do movements. So thank you very much. See you in the next episode.